It's fine with me.
It's fine with me too.
Okay. So I think that's pretty much what I have to say. What Thomas and I do is, well, one of the things that we do is we have our research portal. I don't know how many of you folks have been there, but we have over 2,500 references to coaching research, and then we also have many of the pieces there as well. So it's kind of a one-stop shopping if you're looking for academic coaching research. It's researchportal.coachfederation.org is where it's located. And so kind of our goal, we have several goals. One is to get the coaching research out to folks who are interested in it. Another goal is to assist people who want to do research. So if you have a research project and you want to reach coaches, we can help you. We have, I think it's over 3,500 coaches on our research panel right now. So we've got quite a few. And then the final thing that we do is academic style research, and we've done several studies, and we're kind of in exploration mode right now as to where we're headed next. We have a very full plate of projects we want to do, but we're not sure which one we should tackle next. So that's on our minds, and we're going to be going through that in the next couple months. So that's the background. Is that kind of what you were looking for, Damien?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So I'll turn it over to Thomas, and Thomas is the expert on this. He did 90% of the work on it. So
what I want to say that I know that you have a prepared presentation with a PowerPoint, but also you may want to take advantage to talk, to have a dialogue and a conversation to see what questions you may have for them, and I'm sure they will have a lot of questions for you. So we can also spend some time with that if you want to.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll go through the presentation, and then at the end, if anyone has any questions, or we can have that dialogue then. Will that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, let's get started here. Let's see here. All right. Is my screen showing up?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to
minimize. I'm Thomas. What was that?
I minimize the window so everybody can now see only the presentation and not you, okay?
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's start with the history of coaching supervision. So coaching supervision is influenced a lot by counseling supervision. So back in counseling supervision can trace its roots all the way back to Freud. Then around in the 1920s, it started to become a requisite for psychoanalytic training in Germany. And from there, it kind of grew into other fields, social work, counseling, probation, those types of things. Then from Europe, it moved to North America. And then in the 1970s, it kind of grew into the universities. A lot of research was done. They created supervision models and theories, and then they started requiring it for training in counseling. Back in Europe, the British Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy actually went a step further, and they started requiring it not only for training but ongoing supervision. The regional differences in counseling supervision may have influenced coaching supervision, and we'll see that in a little bit, how what those differences look like between the US and Europe. Back in 2006, there was a UK study done that wanted to look at the prevalence of coaching supervision. And what they found was that there was a big discrepancy between the support for supervision and the actual practice of supervision. So 86% of UK coaches supported supervision, but only 44% had supervision. And there was a lot of different reasons for that. Some stated cost, availability of supervisors. So there was a lot of different reasons for that discrepancy. A follow-up study in 2014 found that that gap had closed, that 92% of UK coaches had supervision. A lot of the barriers to supervision had gone away. 81% of European coaches outside the UK were also in supervision. However, they also looked at other regions. They had smaller sample sizes, but in the US, they found that the prevalence of coaching supervision was much lower. Because of the sample sizes, we didn't report those numbers, but there's a big difference between, there's possibly a big difference between the US and the UK. Another study that was done in 2012 in Australia found that 83% of coaches were in supervision in Australia. What's interesting about Australia is a lot of that supervision was actually peer supervision and informal supervision. Only 26% was actually formal supervision. So it's interesting to look at all the different regions and the differences between them. Here we'll look at some of the differences in definitions. One of the things that was fascinating when I was looking through this research was that no one can really agree about what supervision is and how to define it. So I took many different definitions here and just compared and contrasted, just to compare them. Learning and development was a big theme, as was reflection. Support was also a moderately strong theme. Some of the less prominent themes were that it was a formal process and understanding the client's system, protection, monitoring, and evaluating. So what's interesting too, though, a lot of the research has emphasized the importance of understanding the client system and the organization. So just because that's not included in a lot of the definitions doesn't necessarily mean that that's not important.
So, Thomas, somebody's asking me here if you can, is it okay to share the presentation with the participants or in terms of taking notes or not? What do you think about that?
Joel?
What's the question? Do you, can we give you the slides?
If you can share this, if you can share the slides with me for me to share with the participants.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
So the ICF makes a distinction between mentoring and supervision. It's caused a little confusion in the coaching world. So we'll go over some of the definitions right now. Mentoring, the ICF defines mentoring as coaching for the development of one's coaching. So it's not a supervisor and a coach. It's actually, a coach actually mentoring another coach. Where supervision is a collaborative learning practice to continually build the capacity of the coach through reflective dialogue and to benefit his or her clients and the overall system. There's some differences between the accrediting bodies and how they, what they require in terms of supervision. The ICF requires mentoring for accreditation, but they do not require supervision for accreditation, nor do they require ongoing supervision. The EMCC, the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, and the Association for Coaching, they both require supervision for accreditation and also ongoing supervision. And that also may explain some of the discrepancies between the US and the UK as far as prevalence goes, that those requirements may encourage coaches to actually be involved in supervision. But again, we're not really sure of the relationship there. More studies have to be done for that.
Thomas, if I can ask a question at this time. If I recall that EMCC and Association of Coaching really don't check and verify if individuals are doing ongoing supervision, do they?
That's correct. I mean, they tell them to report it. The guidelines are really loose. They just came out with new guidelines, and I can pull them up here. Let me see. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember. Okay, here it is. The EMCC Coaches and mentors should undertake no less than 1 hour of supervision per 35 hours of practice, ensuring a minimum of 4 hours per year, evenly distributed if possible. That's the EMCC. And the AC doesn't have any official guidelines as far as I know. I mean, they may internally have those guidelines, but they're not available to the public, to my knowledge. So does that answer your question, Joel?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
I just thought it'd be good to share that information.
Yeah. They're starting in the 1970s. Their Tkach came up with 3 functions for social work supervision. And from those functions, Hawkins and Smith developed 3 functions for coaching supervision, and those are developmental, which is learning through reflection, resourcing, so emotional support for the coach, and the qualitative function, which is more of a quality control, monitoring, that kind of thing. Hawkins and Schwank also developed some good practices. They called them good practices. So it takes place regularly, a balance of the different types of supervision, individual, group, and peer supervision, managing the different ethical and confidentiality boundaries and issues that may arise within the supervision or within the coaching relationship, generating organizational learning, providing support, providing ethics and competence quality assurance, constitutes continuing professional development, and then focuses on the client, organization, and the coach. Have you talked about the Hawkins 7-eyed model in class yet, Damien?
Yes.
Okay, so you're familiar with this model.
Yeah, we're using this model to observe and reflect on the supervision sessions.
Okay, great. So yeah, one of the overarching themes in a lot of the different models is that organizational, social, and cultural context. So that's seen in a lot of the different models. This is obviously the most popular model, but that is also in other models as well. Coaching supervision efficacy. To demonstrate the efficacy of coaching supervision would be extremely difficult, expensive, and time-consuming from a research perspective. You would have to have 2 groups of coaches, one in the control, one in supervision. You'd have to track the coaches over time as well as the clients. You'd have to assess the different outcomes for the coaches and the clients. So it would be very time consuming and expensive. So because of that, no study has demonstrated the efficacy of coaching supervision. However, there have been studies done, and there is some anecdotal data that suggests that supervision increases self-awareness, confidence, objectivity, resourcefulness, feelings of belonging. And so there's a good chance that coaching supervision does have efficacy. However, we don't have that data to back that up. One interesting thing I do want to mention about feelings of belonging and support is that they've actually found, or the findings suggest that group supervision is especially helpful in helping coaches feel a sense of belonging. It reduces feelings of isolation, where they can hear the experience of other coaches, and that seems to be really helpful. So something that you might want to keep in mind. Just some suggested research for the future. If we want to show the efficacy of coaching supervision, we'd have to have randomized groups, both a control and an experimental group. We'd have to measure different outcomes for the client, the coach, and the supervisor. Is there a difference in client outcomes between a coach who has supervision and those who don't. What are some different outcome measures for the coach? Maybe feelings of confidence or other measures like that. And also outcome measures for the supervisor as well. The participant characteristics, coachability, coaching level, years of experience for the supervisor and the coach. We'd have to take all those into consideration. Also measuring bonds between the coach and the supervisor and the coach and the client. Does that influence coaching outcome? Does that influence supervision outcome? Or does the supervision actually increase those bonds? Something like the working alliance inventory, those types of scales could possibly be used to measure that. Measuring the different tasks between the coach and the supervisor, and also measuring the supervisor ability to adapt to the coach level. Do they adapt their supervision to people who maybe have not been coaching for very long, and also up to expert coaches as well. So here's some references.
So on that last chart, I also want to make the point that at the novice level, what we saw is that coaches may want to be working on techniques, for example, upgrading their skills, building their skills, I should say. And sort of a mid-level coach may be wanting to upgrade their skills, whereas an expert level or master level coach may be more interested in some self-reflection and some just seeing what emerges or what pops up in the supervision. So the needs that a coach has, depending on their level, may change very significantly, and it's very important for a supervisor to be able to adapt to that level.
Thank you, Joel. So that concludes our presentation, and we can open it up for discussion. Any questions that you may have?
Okay, if you want to ask a question, I would like for you to say, yeah.
I'm having a hard time hearing. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's talking, but
yeah, I will. She's far away, so I will repeat for you. Okay.
Okay.
Now they are the research team, so they may not have any answers about ICF as an organization. They were asking like a question if ICF is thinking about having a credential for coach supervisors.
I'll take that one. There's nothing in the plan today to do so.
Yes, come here and sit, and you can.
Hi, I'm Edie. How are you?
Hello.
All right, so I'm the one who's notoriously overly direct and looks left when I'm just curious. So there's the disclaimer. Okay. All right. If you go, there was a slide that said it is because of this whole list of things, we can't measure the effectiveness of supervision. Is that right?
Well, no, we didn't say we couldn't measure it. I believe that we could measure it.
If we had that whole list of things that make it too difficult.
Yes, and so the difficulty is that it's going to take a lot of coaches. You're going to have to measure a lot of coaches, a lot of clients. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept, what's called effect size.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have a small effect size to have statistical power, then you have to have a lot of coaches, clients, and so forth. And in a study like this, it's going to be, you're going to have to follow a coach, the supervisor, and the client for at least 6 months. And you're going to have quite a bit of dropout during that time.
Yep.
So it's going to be huge.
Yep. Yep.
That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Pardon?
So why is that a problem?
Well, it's a lot of time and money. And the question is, so we have anecdotal evidence that it works. The clinical field, the social work field, both require supervision. So, following in those footsteps, we feel like it's a worthwhile thing to do. But, I priced it out once, and it was like close to $1 million to do the study.
Yep.
So is that a good use of $1 million? I don't know.
Just thought I'd raise that. I have a little bit of experience with big, sloppy, ugly kind of data sets and big, sloppy, ugly, difficult things. And one of the things I was taught is maybe you can shape the research questions so you can get at this in smaller pieces and make the large sample size not a problem.
Okay.
So I'm just suggesting that there's a lot of horsepower in this room.
Okay.
And I'm suggesting that maybe posing that as a question, as a request, as opposed to we can't do that. Maybe closing some doors that could possibly be cracked open. Just saying.
Okay. So feel free to contact. Damien has my contact info, and feel free to contact me. We can set up a Skype session. We can chat over email. I'm definitely open to ideas.
Yeah. So I'm gonna coach that and turn it right back around to you. If this is interesting to you, my name's Edie Greenblatt, and you're welcome to reach out to me.
Okay. Thank you.
I am the voice of Kim C, who has access to thousands of coaches.
Okay, good.
Okay, go ahead. I don't know if we would do this, but let me just pose it.
We can't hear, or I can't hear at least.
Do you know are you familiar with the organization Coach Source?
Not really. I mean, a little bit. I've heard of them.
Okay. So she's one of Coach Source's nodes. Okay. We have a group of 15 coaches here who are all affiliated with the same large coaching organization, Coach Source.
So if we had, is there a way to plot to say, as a data set to say, 15 here, we follow the 15, say, well, here to
Is there a way to use the 15 coaches here who are all being trained and all starting as a research sample that could give you some kind of I'm going to paraphrase, ability to do a longitudinal study that has a fixed starting point, which is now when we're all getting trained? Or we can do a qualitative one because we have all people who are aligned and we can keep the training conditions were all identical. So Got that?
I think so. So the answer is yes, there would be a possibility. And, a lot of the research that is out there is qualitative in this field. And, we could do another qualitative study, but I would like to do a quantitative study. And, what you say is very appealing. And so we have 15 coaches who are going to be, I assume you're going to be supervising, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's really good. Now we have to go get the coaches who are not in supervision, and we have to come up with all the...
a few hundred of those, or thousands of them.
Okay. So, so that's one issue, is getting the coaches. Then there is the issue of us and our bandwidth. So we're just two people and working full time. And so, we have priorities, and so far this has not been a priority, the highest priority that we have. So while we really appreciate your offer, I don't know that we could take you up on it today, because it would take an extensive amount of our time.
Okay, Joel. Hi, this is Colleen.
Hi, Colleen.
Hello.
I was just going to suggest that perhaps we could even help find
graduate student who wants to do their dissertation on it. I actually got my PhD because of all these fine people in the room filled out my quantitative survey. So Coach Source is usually pretty open to being a participant pool. I can't speak on behalf of the owners. They'll come up with that. But it could be that we could even find somebody that would be willing to do the study because they need to do the study anyway. So we don't want to put it on you necessarily that has to happen, but we too as future supervisors would want to have that data to be able to say, hey, this is effective, and that's going to help us grow our businesses. It's going to help, us be able to speak about it in the United States as well. So it's a possibility that it won't be right on your shoulders as well. Yeah.
We can't hear you.
Is that we have a US?
Yeah. So we're a global organization, but we have a high number of that global organization of US coaches. So just to keep that in mind as well, that we would have. Yeah, I think we have majority of us here, 13 out of 15, right? 13 and a half are US based as well. So just food for thought.
Okay, so yeah, I wouldn't even mind doing something that's just US. I mean, that's clearly better than nothing.
Right.
And if you can find a PhD student who wants to do their dissertation, we'll help as much as we can.
Yeah, so
I mentioned that we have that research panel, and I help PhD students all the time. I mean, I do probably 4 or 5 exchanges with students a month on, they're working on their dissertation. Hey, what should I do? And I help them with measures and
so in a few weeks, a few of us, even in this room, are going to be Division 13 conference, Society of Contemporary Psychologists.
I'll be there too.
So you and I and a few others could even collaborate, and there's a zillion students that will be there and may be interested. So we can bring up that topic.
Sure, I'd be happy to chat about it.
Okay. All right, great.
I'll see you there.
Okay,
see you in Seattle.
Okay. And actually the CEO of Coach Source will be there. So
okay, cool.
Bring that together. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Joel.
Hi.
This is Catherine. I think we had breakfast at the last Division 13, and that had gotten me on my path toward ICF certification, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, good.
Anyway, it occurs to me that the ROI question didn't come up in the slides that Thomas showed. And I don't know that I've heard about this in conjunction with coach supervision, but having done some ROI of coaching research in the past, it makes me wonder if that could be another angle on some of this. It's not the efficacy question, but if coaches are wondering what value am I going to find before I invest in that personally, that could be another interesting, useful lens. And I'll send some stuff, some questionnaires and all that I developed for another research project. And we might look at how some of those questions could be modified to use in terms of coach supervision. Any reactions to the ROI proposition?
Thomas, do you want to take that one? Or?
I am not aware of any ROI research done on coaching supervision. To me, that seems like another outcome that you would want to measure, or possibly measure. I mean, we could measure the efficacy of coaching and how it affects the coach and client, but we could also measure possibly the return on investment of coaching supervision. But I'm not aware of any research out there right now that measures that.
So the question I would have is, would we have to show efficacy and effect size before we can measure ROI?
Well, at least in the previous work that I had done, it was treated as a separate question in terms of the perception. It's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So looking at perceptions, in that case it was coaching. So we were looking at the perceptions of the client, of their boss, and of HR, and looking at some differences between those perceptions. In the case of coach supervision, it's beauty in the eyes of the coach is being supervised, and potentially if there was a way to tie, through Coach Source maybe, some of the outcome measures that they already include on effectiveness. I mean, there may be some possibilities here. Well, I don't want to.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to try to do that. And I'm just trying to, I guess I'm just trying to think how we would measure ROI if we don't have the difference between a control group and a supervision group. Do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. So maybe in some ways this isn't like, it's not a parallel situation of those coached to those not coached like that.
Right.
But at least an initial attempt at estimating or trying to understand how people perceive value could be a baseline for future research.
Yeah, and you know, I like, I assume you guys are familiar with David Peterson. He's one of the earliest researchers on coaching, and he, at Google, he asked the question, was this coaching worth your time? Because his thought is that people's time is one of their most valuable assets, and so if they feel that the coaching was worth their time, then that's a good singular measure of coaching. And you could tweak and use a similar kind of measure, possibly, to look at, to use as an ROI indicator.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Good idea.
Do you have any questions, Thomas, George? Do you have any questions for the coaches here that you are curious, that you want to know around the coaching supervision?
I guess the singular question I have is why people in the group have chosen to undertake to be in a coaching supervision group.
Hi, Joel. It's Jeff from Louisville. How are you?
I thought that was you.
Yeah, so a couple of things. When I led coaching at Humana as an internal coach, I had heard about coach supervision back in 2011 and really wanted to bring it in so we could raise the quality. So it's a quality control measure, that third variable that you shared. So I think that's one week that it's not just for internal coaches, but if we're going to raise the bar for the profession, it's not just through certifications, but it's through the quality of coaches and how they raise their own quality control. And what I've been learning is that supervision is the way to do that, and there are variables that we can measure in the supervision process to do that. So I think that's one reason. Another reason is, and I love ICF. I'm an ICF member, and I treasure you all as people. But if it's not a priority for ICF, that doesn't mean that coaches aren't going to do it, and that we'll take the profession, the supervision aspect of profession forward if professional associations aren't going to go with us. And I want to just say that because we're in the middle of training. I believe that in 2011, when the value proposition for organizations to not just do training in supervision, but to actually see the quality of coaching rise inside a corporation where they can measure inside their bubble what that looks like, was found. And Ernst & Young has experienced that, and so have a lot of other organizations. So I think it's just that we don't just have a passion to be better coaches. We've found a vehicle to do that outside and beyond what certification and coach mentoring gets us, and we're going to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, I like it. Thank you.
Hi, Joel. I'm Lillian.
Hi, Lillian.
Hi. So Jeff said it all beautifully. I just want to add that I think I got exposed to supervision through work for a European-based coaching firm because it's automatic for them. They expect it. I know that certain organizations that were not on your list, like Apex, if you've heard of Apex.
Sure.
So they include, if you want to renew your accreditation as an individual coach, you must submit a statement from your supervisor stating that you've gotten supervision and some details about it. So that's a requirement of accreditation. So my concern is that I really believe that this, why am I here in this room? First of all, when I met supervision, it adds so much to the quality of the practice. And I think the kind of coaches that we both want to be and want to associate with and want to own as other fellow executive coaches at least, are those who are continually growing, learning, and developing and becoming better and better and adding back to the field. So I think the bus, this is a train that's leaving. I think that supervision is coming to the U.S. because once a coach gets a taste of it, you think, how can I do my practice ethically without it? So for that reason, I'm a little dismayed by kind of the lack of priority or lack of interest in it that I see by the ISCF, to be honest. Because again, like I said, I'm exposed to these European organizations and the experience of it. So I do think it's coming, and I hope that, you know, ICF gets on board with it and supports it through research. I think that would be amazing.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, we definitely feel it's important. There's absolutely no doubt about that. It's just, where does it fall on the priority list? And that's the difficulty for us.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, for you, I'm bringing I have a bad foot, so I'm okay.
Oh, sorry.
Hello. Thanks for being here today, first of all. Look, they're all taking care of me. I think to answer your question, I think the reason Coach Source really kind of hosted this first one is, and Brian Underhill, our CEO and founder, was here yesterday, and he talked a little about it. And that's that we started to see the request and demand from clients. Like any smart company, if clients want it, you kind of have to pay a little bit of attention. So I think that was sort of the first impetus. I think the second one was, as we think about, we're asked in RFPs and proposals and those sort of things about the quality of our coaches and how do we maintain quality control. And we kind of struggled with how to answer that question a little bit. And so supervision is a piece of it. And we have engagement managers who are there for support, but you know, there's just certain elements. And so supervision became kind of interesting that way. Clearly we're global. We have a little over 1,000 coaches in 51 countries. And it's such a well-accepted practice in Europe. And even if, like I was in India last month and people were talking about it a little bit, not a lot, but far more than the US. I think the next one was Damien, in his great wisdom, has been sort of holding the little flag for coach supervision. And so a couple of us, I'm not sure who else, saw him present last year at the APA Division 13 conference, right, in Florida. That was February. So that was sort of interesting. And then we hosted a couple of ICF PCC trainings last summer. Damien did 2 groups of 25. So there was a little bit more of that. And then probably the last thing is this group of people and their interest in it. So we kind of said, well, let's see if there's an interest out there. And so all of those pieces just sort of came together in a way that said, this is happening. To Lily's point, the train is leaving the station. Is this the right thing to do? And we have a desire to offer things to our coaches in terms of coach development that they see as important and interesting. And so anyway, that's kind of from a coach's point of view, that's kind of how it all came together.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that perspective.
I wanted to know.
Okay, yeah, no, that's awesome.
I didn't want them to translate all of that because I didn't know what was in my head until I said it. Yeah, it goes along that.
Okay, so let's say the last, anybody have a last comment?
Joel, hi, I'm Ted Middleberg. Good day. And I'm going to bring in a different perspective, and that is, as an adult learner, being in a supervisory relationship is how I learn best. And there's a deep passion for increasing my capabilities, skills at helping the clients. And I learn in a supervisory relationship where I have that intense ability ongoing regularly to have a supervisor. So it's that commitment to the field and then myself. And there's another one. Clients, the companies, they're doing stuff with or without us in terms of converting guys who are managers and executives into coaches. They would really benefit from having skilled people guide them in a supervisory capacity, the people they're assigning to roles as coaches. And they're going to do that with me or without me, or without the cadre of trained supervisors or not. And it's not in the best interests of the members of their organization, is my belief. So those are both deeply value-based reasons. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that perspective. That's excellent. Appreciate it.
Okay, we need to wrap up. I wonder if anybody have any last question for Joel or Thomas before we finish? Yeah.
I'd love to have two references. One is, what's a good journal to read that's really paying attention to leading edge stuff on supervising coaches? Were you able to hear that?
Yes. Thomas, you want to?
Second one.
I don't, I didn't look, I mean, I looked at so many sources. I think I read like 60 different references. But let's see here. Well, I'd say any of the coaching journals. So the International Journal of Evidence-Based Coaching and Mentoring, the International
Hello?
No, it's frozen.
Both.
Yeah. Hello?